there, and welcome to the Healing Word of the Week podcast with me, Marissa of Marissa Moments, where you might get triggered into seeing your own reflection, but it's to reconnect you to yourself and awaken the divinity within. So prepare for laughs, resonance, and accountability through true stories, channeled messages, prophetic words, and everything in between. So I hope you're ready, because guess what? Here we go. Okay, so the word of the week is projection, right? And let me tell you, so I was listening to the Tickety Talk, and because I'm doing housework, and if you have been listening or following along with me, then you know that whenever I do any type of housework, cleaning, laundry, all those things, it's very meditative to me because it just is basically a muscle memory type of work, right? So I don't have to think. I'm just basically physically present, but not mentally present. And it allows me the space and the capacity to allow my mind to float off into the ether and be receptive to whatever messages that God, Gaia, ancestors, angels, and saints wish to put in there, right? So anyway, all that to say, projection, right? The thing that I received is based off of a true story. So I can recall at one point, some family members told me that I was being way too lofty in my expectations and that I needed to literally dumb down myself in order to find that significant other that would be able to tolerate my level of intelligence, right? They wanted me to downplay every part of me. Now, this isn't to call them the villains or me the victim or anything like that. This is just an illustration of the point, right? And they weren't the only ones who said something similar to me, right? Very, very close people in my life have always said that I was too much, right? Doing too much, being too loud, too, right? Those should be my magic numbers. But anyway, what I have to share with you is that those were projections. Because it was projections based off of their rejections, right? Because they didn't think that they could exist in a land of perfection. Ooh, I didn't know I had bars, but here we are, right? Well, jokes aside, what I received to share with you is that people will project onto you what they feel is their inadequacies, and they will make it seem like it is you all day long. But what they fail to realize is that everything that they experience from you in terms of a trigger is actually a space and place that they need to heal within their own self, right? And within their own heart. But the way God made me, wonderfully and fearfully made and humbly made, should I add, is that I don't really exist with too many insecurities, with the caveat to that being until people remind me that I need to be insecure about something, right? So in those moments, I did have those reflections and I did start to think to myself, well, maybe I am too much. Maybe that's why my relationships haven't worked out in the past. Maybe why this, maybe this is why blah, 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 right? Etc., etc. But then just as soon as those notions came across my heart, God came in with a powerful, basically a powerful broom or, what's those power sprayers, came in with that and just swept it away out of my heart. And I continued on being myself because that was the only thing I knew how to do authentically. Sure, I got quiet. I got a little bit more quiet and I recognized that maybe I wasn't going to share as much with those people and that was their loss, right? But it didn't mean that I needed to, air quotes, dumb down myself or exist in a way and manner that made me feel uncomfortable in my own skin, right? Now, anxiety and depression, of course, they were there because I did have those internal battles. So to a certain respect, those notions did sink in a bit, right? I'm not completely impervious to suggestion, right? However, the reason why, again, I have this notion put on my heart to share with you is because we have to be very mindful in these moments. When people say that your dreams and aspirations are too much and they start to give you the rule book on how you can play things down or how you can maybe lessen the manifestations or the visions that God put on your heart, then that's when we have to hit that mute button, right? And, funny thing about the mute button, right? If you have a television, if you're blessed enough to have a television, when you hit that mute button, that doesn't stop them from talking. That doesn't stop them from having action or anything like that. It just stops you from listening and hearing to what they say. Now, I'm not saying that overall you need to just mute everybody and cut out every single word that they say, because they might, throw some gems in there. But as it relates to trying to feed into insecurities, or even more, trying to create insecurities within yourself where they didn't exist, that's when you mute, right? Because it is a projection onto you. Just because somebody else feels like they are incapable of basically creating and living out a dream that is put on their heart doesn't mean that you are incapable too. It just means that they are limited by their own beliefs and imagination and capabilities, and they choose to limit themselves. Whereas maybe you are pushed by your dreams and your visions, and you activate them. Because to know something and to do something are two totally different things. And maybe you are the person that not only knows it, but you actually do it. And maybe they're the people that know things, but then they get caught up in that hook, right? That tether that says, who do you think you are? So if we allow people to put those notions in our heart, right, and not just on our surface, and we absorb those notions and we continue to carry on with these people who continue to tell us who we aren't capable of becoming, right? If we allow them to continue to project their limitations and their limiting beliefs and all these things onto us, then guess what? We're going to be exactly where they are, in a land of misery. And then we turn around and project it onto someone else. And that's what continues the cycle. Now we're talking about generational curses, right? How do you think it is that people end up in the same place and space as their forefathers, whether it be their parents or their parents' parents or their parents' parents' parents, right? This is what happens when all it takes is one person to say, listen, I see what you do and I appreciate everything that you've done, but my aspirations are a little bit bigger. And that doesn't make anyone better than or less than the other. It just means that you are following your heart and your calling. You are stepping into your purpose. You are finding purpose behind that pain. And you are not allowing those projections of previous generations to tell you what you are incapable of becoming, when you know that you are fully capable. Because guess what? If God put a notion on your heart, that means you are capable of seeing it to full fruition. Not just fruition, not just partial, not just a little snippet, not just a fraction of it, but full fruition. But it is up to you, because God helps those who help themselves. And if we continue to allow people to project their insecurities onto us, then guess what? We're going to stay tethered to the place in space where we no longer wish to be. That's when we outgrow a space and then find ourselves hunching over, right? Because now we have to cram ourselves into the space in order to make it work. But even though the entire time our heart is calling for more, but we start to look around because that's a space of discomfort. And try to figure out how we can make it work. And then we wonder why our back aches so much and why we wake up in so much pain. And that's not to say just because you start seeing your visions to fruition that you're not going to wake up in pain. But listen, your body knows what your heart is calling for. And sometimes when we are not in alignment and we force ourselves out of alignment intentionally, just based off of somebody else's projections, especially, then that is when we start to get sick. Because physically, emotionally, mentally, all of these things are interconnected. And when we fight against our truth and our heart's calling, then that's when we start to suffer. That's when we sit in those seats of anxiety and depression. Now, I'm not a therapist or anything like that. I'm not a PhD or anything like that. But I can tell you from my own personal experience, the time when I was in my deepest, darkest depression, the time when I was at the height of my anxiety, was when I was fighting against myself. When I felt like I had to stifle myself anytime I left the house, anytime I joined into a conversation, anytime that I told myself that I had nothing to add to a conversation, where I was afraid of those social interactions because what if they asked me a question I didn't know? And now that I have embraced and accepted the fact that I am capable of way more than I even gave myself credit for, then I don't exist with those demons on me anymore. That depression, that anxiety. Now, listen here. I'm not saying it's completely gone, because I do still have moments. Listen, I live in Chicago. So if it comes down to parallel parking, oh yeah, my heart's going to skip a beat, because I drive a big truck and it's hard to get in those little tight spaces, right? So that means I got to round the block and round the block and round the block and try to find the biggest space I can possibly find, right? That means I'm going to get in some extra cardio. But in the interim, not to say that I'm not capable of it, because now, as opposed to then, I will actually try, right? Because I have a newfound confidence in my Father. My Father has granted me this newfound freedom and confidence in being myself and in trying to only make Him proud with the capital HIM, right? Because now I no longer live for other people's opinions. Now I no longer live for other people's projections, right? Now I no longer form myself based off of what other people, how they see themselves in the mirror. Now I refuse to be somebody's false reflection and projection, right? Which means that, listen, I am very quirky, right? But God made me this way. I don't dress fancy at this point in my life, but God made me this way. And any time that I come to the crossroad where I start to question myself and say, maybe I need to change up the way that I speak. Maybe I need to change up the way that I dress. I have to just remind myself, am I living for God to please Him, or am I living to please someone else of this earthly plane, right? Because if it's the latter, then I'm going to revert back to how He made me. But again, we're talking about projections, right? Because people will continue to do it. And they mean well. They might not even be aware that they're doing it, but it's just something that is trauma trained within all of us, right? So maybe their parents did that to them. Like I said, that cycle, within the family where everybody's in construction, and there's nothing wrong with that. Construction can be a very lucrative and satisfying, employment or whatever it is, right? Occupation, there's the word. Thank you, Lord. But at the same time, if your heart calls for something else, and listen, I'm not here to break up any families, but I'm here to remind you of who you are and who you're capable of being, right? To awaken that divinity within you, right? So when you feel like that is not your calling, then maybe it's God telling you that you have to go a different direction, and standing in the faith and trust that of knowing that if that construction company is supposed to continue, then it will, but not through you being there and basically piling up your list of resentments and anger and anguish and all of these things just to pass that down to the next generation, just so you can keep the company alive, right? Because maybe you have a gardening center in your heart, and maybe that's something that will change up the world and allow you to thrive, right? Now, I'm using these as examples. And again, I'm not saying that you need to shut down your family business, but what I am saying is that you don't have to be subjected to those projections. And even when you are, one, you can hit that mute button, like I said. So it's like womp, 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 right? You see them moving, but it's not absorbing. You're not taking it in, internally into your heart, right? And I totally forgot point 2. So I guess God just wants me to tell you to hit the mute button, right? Long story short, and bottom line to this bottom line is people are, yes, in fact, projecting onto you. And when you are able to identify it, because we're on this healing journey, right? We're not saying that anything and everything that we don't agree with is now a projection and pish posh. We are canceling that out, right? Because we have to be open to like constructive criticism and healing and redirection and all of those different types of things. So we're not able to use this as an excuse, Lord have mercy, as an excuse or a scapegoat to be able to sit within our complacency or to prevent ourselves from actually doing the work of healing. Because at the end of the day, healing does take work, and it is a journey, right? Because we all have been handed down these generational curses, whether they be air quotes, big or small, but we all have something that we can work on and that we're capable of working on. And if you're listening to my voice right here, right now, it's because you are aware of this. However, getting back to the main point at hand, let's steer clear of the projections. Let's not allow them to absorb into our person. Let's not allow them to steer us into where we know we're not supposed to be. Let's not allow it to make us a clone or a carbon copy of someone else. Let us Instead, allow it to highlight the places and spaces that we no longer resonate with. Allow it to give us a springboard to growth and healing, right? Whether that means going to talk to a therapist, whether that means creating distance and space between people who are toxic in your life, if you have the capacity to do so, right? But bottom line is you have to work on yourself. You have to work on that healing in order to recognize and use your discernment to recognize those projections. So I'm not going to keep going on and on because it's already been over 15 minutes. So hopefully you get the point and you're able to recognize when someone is actually projecting onto you. And the other thing that I was just put on my heart to share with you is make sure you don't take it personally. Because honestly, most people do have your best interest at heart in accordance with their law and their training, right? So it doesn't mean that it's for nefarious reasons that they want to keep you tethered and stuck, right? Not everyone comes from a dark place and space, but we do what we are taught. So that's where that continuation and that generational curse and that trauma training and all those different types of things come into play. That's why it's important to continue your healing. That's why it's important to continue your mindfulness. That's why it's important to go to places and spaces that encourage growth, ascension, love, light, all the things, and clarity. Right? So that's it for now. Thank you so much for listening. You know, I always say nothing is better than walking your healing journey than walking it with a friend. So friends, thank you so much for joining me, and feel free to look up in the archives. There's so many different videos and so many different podcasts and all these different messages that are here to help you on your ascension journey, on your healing journey, and whatever other kind of journey that you're basically on. So also, don't forget to look me up and friend me all over social media. I'm literally everywhere, you guys. But when you look me up, just remember, I'm a different type of Marissa, right? So I'm Marissa with one S because there's only one me. So full look up Marissa Moments, Marissa with one S. So I look forward to being friends with you all over social media, seeing you, put comments in there. Let me know how this resonates, if it resonates, or just shoot out an emoji, right? And feel free to share with anyone that you feel might resonate with the message as well. But of course, use your common sense because I'm not here to break up friendships because I can't hang out with you, right? I mean, I could try, but I probably can't, right? Because I'm pretty busy. But anyway, have the best week ever, and apples and tomatoes, all the things. Happy healing. And until next time, bye.